Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to another Planet FPL special. Last week, you might remember a pod I did with Dara Curran at the Tinkerman, welcoming back Fulham again. Well, now we're going to welcome back Bournemouth again. Let me introduce you to our Bournemouth correspondent, Neil Grover. How are you, Neil?
I'm fabulous. Thank you. You?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Last Tuesday was a big one, wasn't it? How nervous were you going into that game with Forest, knowing that a draw was probably enough, but if you got beat, it was tilting on the edge where it looked like for the majority of the season you probably would go up?
Yeah, I mean, there's no bones about it. That was probably the biggest game for Bournemouth, probably in the last, well, since before we went up, right? Like it was that big. I mean, the prize, it was essentially a one-off playoff game. For whoever won that was likely to be in the driving seat come the last day. It was squeaky bum. I'm not afraid to say, but I think there was confidence we wouldn't lose. Put it that way.
Does this feel different to the first time you came up? Because you exceeded all expectations, but it feels a little bit from the neutral point of view that it was very much considered fairy tale stuff when you came up the first time. Now there's a little bit of, well, actually, with the parachute payments, the money from the Russian owner, Denim, that actually you're not a small fish anymore in that pond. How different does it feel now?
Yeah, I think there was definitely that expectation this year that we would at least be in the discussion. I think most fans probably expected us to be perhaps in the playoffs rather than automatics, just because of who was coming down. I mean, like at the start of the year, obviously we did the podcast with Gemma, and I was shocked to see where West Brom have ended up. To be honest, I thought they would be a lot stronger of a contender. I thought Sheffield United would be a bit closer as well, and then we knew what Fulham would be. Plus, there's always one or two teams. This year it was Forest and Luton as well. I mean, you've got to give them a shout out as well that have sort of cut it. It made us work for it, I think.
Talk to me about Scott Parker, mate.
So it's been a real mixed bag for him this year. So I think I was very happy at the appointment. The board made it very clear who they wanted. They identified. I mean, he was identified as the successor to Eddie, which was never going to be an easy task. It's like it's our equivalent replacing Alex Ferguson at Man U, right? He's been there. It was, when he left, it was Eddie Howe FC. And he's come in. It's taken time that for the fan base to warm to him. There was a few periods in the middle of the season where I think that there were boos and all of that, despite us being in the sort of top three or so. But I think recently, and there's a real noticeable shift from after the Preston North End game where he got sent off and he had to come and sit with us in the stands.
Just for the Reading draw?
Yeah. So after that,
this was a really bad reaction to that particular game.
Yeah, we shouldn't have lost. We shouldn't have drawn it. Like, we should have put them to the sword. Again, with the greatest respect to Reading, there's a reason they are where they ended up in the table. They probably would have gone down if it wasn't for points deductions elsewhere. And we just did not look like a team that deserved to go up that game. And I think Parker looked at that, he watched it from our viewpoint. And post that game, there was a noticeable shift in his sort of tactics. Not necessarily the style of play. Like, we got what we were expecting in that regard, in the sort of Parker ball that people talk about. Certainly Fulham fans. But he made some real progression, I think, as a manager up post that point. And then towards the end, I think the fans have grown to him now, and now he's got some equity again. We were viewing him with the eyes of, with the same sort of brush that we were thinking about Eddie Howe with, whereas now he's not Eddie Howe, and there never will be another manager like that for AFC Bournemouth. But now he's got that sort of equity with the fans and all of that. So, I'm looking forward to see what he can do in the Premiership. He's earned sort of our respect now, I think.
What is Parker ball? What is it?
It's percentage football. So he will play a style that at times is, there's no two ways about it. It's boring at times. They will play for it's very possession orientated, and they will play. They'll be very, very strong at the back. I think the stats will show that we were the best defensive team in the championship. Most clean sheets, least goals conceded, least errors. All of the, basically any stat you want to throw up, we were the best at. But what does happen, and it reminds me a little bit of some of the criticism that Wenger got towards the end of his days, where they were trying to pass it in a little bit. Rather than perhaps taking a slightly lower percentage shot chance when the keeper's maybe not ready, they'll look to pass a ball to someone that's got, in theory, a 10% better XG chance. And that's fine if he then puts it in. But if he doesn't, you get the big groan in the fans because everyone could see there was a shot chance that they didn't take on because of what they've been drilled. What has changed, and this loops back to what I said about that post the Reading game, is he's moved away from perhaps being super defensive and playing with the handbrake on, I think, as people have described it, to having a slightly little, that's still his core philosophy, but he's got a little bit more adventure in his, particularly in his substitutions. He's been a little bit more aggressive with those. I think we saw that in the Forest game. Everyone, when Lerma went on, in the past, he would have brought Pearson on, a like-for-like central midfielder, holding central midfielder. Instead, he brought on Moore, who then obviously scored. I think that was a real, this is the change that's occurred moment. So I think that's sort of where it's going, and I hope that continues. I hope that sort of adventure continues. I've got no problem with possession, with sort of possession football, but you do need to have that sort of spear as well.
I guess there's a finer balance, isn't it? Because obviously you reference Eddie Howe a lot. Many of us enjoyed obviously watching you the years that you were in the Premier League. I think many of us still consider it remarkable that you stayed up as long as you did, particularly after sort of year one and year two. Yeah. But the common theme every year, wasn't it? Conceding way too many goals. I think you conceded over 60 goals. I want to say all of your Premier League seasons. You mentioned obviously it was just 39 goals conceded from 46 played in the Championship this year. It's very good. Then the flip side of that is 28 goals scored less than obviously champions Fulham. Did the question marks last with Parker a little bit even more because what Fulham have gone on and done this year? Because we reflect on them last year and how many times we watched them and went, they're all right to watch. They're defensively really solid. Never felt like they were going to score. Is that a fear for you coming up?
I think it was. And I think that was, again, I do feel like there was almost a light bulb moment for him at that Reading game where he sort of went, okay, this is great. We've got, I think at one point we had sort of like 75, 80% possession in the second half or something. But we're not doing, there's no cut and thrust there. And that was exactly what we saw of Fulham, right? Okay, maybe not against the big six, but otherwise. And then since then, I mean, we did have some reasonable wins. We haven't had as many of those like Eddie Howe results, like the games against Birmingham when we came up and we won 8-0 and things like that. That we've never looked like doing that. But we beat Huddersfield 3-0. And, there are those sort of results in there as well. I don't expect us to be a team that comes into the Premier League like last time and tries to outscore every opponent. I think that that isn't Parker's Bournemouth. I think you can expect us to be a lot more responsible with the ball and at the back. But I do think there is a little bit more cut and thrust than there was in that Fulham team. And I would like to say, I mean, it's been touched upon a lot that Fulham were one of the better teams supposedly to come out of the Championship in recent years, and we only did finish 2 points behind them in the end.
Yeah, very fair. Is it almost exclusively a back four now? Because obviously last year, again, reflecting on Parker's Fulham, it really flip-flopped between back four and back three quite a lot. But it looks like, from what I've looked at, it's almost always back four for you.
So it can be quite situational. So it will start as a back four, sort of a traditional back four. But what he will do is we will play it generally Lerma in this role, but it can move around a little bit. as sort of the bottom of the midfield triangle, if you like. And he will, in periods of like real pressure, he will drop in as a third centre back. And then what will also happen, folks join me, is if we're under real pressure or we're trying to protect a result, that Lerma will then join it and become a proper third centre back rather than just dropping in at certain points in play. So you end up with a de facto back five at that point.
And then presumably the two more advanced midfielders come in and play deeper.
Yeah,
and I guess
exactly.
It kind of can revert towards more of a 5-4-1 then, are we saying?
Yeah, it can do. But then the other thing that you will notice is sometimes when we're on the attack as well, Lerma will hang back a little bit deeper than you perhaps would expect of a central mid to allow the fullbacks to really go forward. I think fullback play is still a huge part of this Bournemouth identity, which is really good to see. I love a marauding fullback.
So we're identifying Lerma as really a single pivot rather than a double pivot. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, so he's kind of that linchpin between the midfield and the defence. There's still very much a philosophy of playing out from the back. Kelly is crucial to that. He is much more of a ball-playing centre-back than we've seen with his partners this year. Obviously, Cahill, which we don't know what's happening with him at time of recording.
It's out of contract, I'm taking it, or?
He's out of contract, yeah. We signed a one-year deal and he hasn't played really in the past since January. So I'd be a little bit surprised if he came back. He was a fabulous signing, though. Really enjoyed him. And he really shored us up in those early months, particularly. And then Nat Phillips was his other partner. I expect, and there's a lot of chat that we will get him back, be it on a loan or on a permanent signing. As everyone knows, we love a Liverpool signing.
And not all of them have worked, mate.
Not all of them. More than I think we get credit for. But yeah, he. I do think he's. He's a classical centre back. Like if you put him in a 1970s Leeds kit, he would fit right in. And he'll head his way through a brick wall. So that kind of does work. Like that sort of ball playing plus the no nonsense. And then you've got Mepham as well, who I expect will leave. I'm afraid to say.
Not good enough.
He's just not. I think he's good enough. He's just fallen a little bit out of favour. Obviously, since Phillips came in, he ended up dropping to perhaps fourth choice centre back at times. I just think we're at a point where it's probably best for him and us if he moves on. So I expect he'll move in the summer.
So I must credit FPL Sponge who tagged you and I. Neil's dog's turned up. You might have noticed.
Yeah.
I must credit FPL Sponge who tagged you and I in a tweet this morning. I'm sure it's of a video that you'd already seen, which is of Scott Parker. I think it's at half time of the Forest game, maybe before, but I think it's at half time. Where he's talking about how he wants the team to play second half, and he talks a lot about releasing Nat Phillips as the kind of go-to safe ball to go home. You mentioned about him being strong on the ball. I think possibly because we saw him play a lot for Liverpool a couple of years ago, we didn't actually recognise him in comparison to people like Van Dijk and Joel Matip as actually this ball-playing centre-back. We looked at him as what you said, kind of the old-fashioned 1970s. He'll go and head it, block everything, etc. So is he really important to you in terms of how you start play?
He is, yeah. And when I say he's got that classical centre-back side of it, it would be doing him a disservice to not mention that he can play with his feet as well. He's not a total goon at the back. And as you say, he really does act as a real nice foil for Kelly. I still think Kelly is the focal point in terms of when we actually play out, but that initial ball and sort of some of the mop-up goes through Phillips. I think the other thing that Phillips does bring is he's a real aerial presence from sort of set pieces and things as well. I don't think he scored. He might have scored one, but you have to mark him. You probably have to double mark him, which allows someone like a Solanke or a Billing to then, or a Moore, to sort of go unmarked. And I think that's what he brings in. Doesn't help us with FPL necessarily, but it is big for the Bournemouth philosophy going forward.
No goals for Phillips. We have seen him score at Premier League level for Liverpool. I'm sure he will be a target for you at set pieces. Lloyd Kelly's a player people might not know a lot about. Perhaps people who don't watch the Championship. He's captain right now. He's 23. He was signed. I'm right in saying that you signed him for a significant amount of money from Charlton. I think about 13 million when he was still in the Prem. And he basically missed all the season through injury your last year in the Premier League. Am I reading that right from memory?
Yeah, it was Bristol Rovers, but it was, I think it was sort of that 12, 15 million sort of mark. He was seen as the replacement for Ake at the time. We bought him in the last season we were in the Premier League, because the writing was on the wall that regardless of outcome of that season, we would probably lose Ake. Ake was going to go. I think he would have gone even if we'd stayed up. Perhaps we'd have got a bit more, but c'est la vie. So he was brought in as the natural successor to him. He's a left-footed centre-back, or a left-sided centre-back. He can play at full-back as well, but generally doesn't anymore. Certainly that was his role at Bristol, was as a left-back. So he does have that versatility, but we've not seen it in the Championship. What does happen is he really does. He's our defensive marshal as well as our captain. He plays, and he's a lot more comfortable on the ball. But as you say, he is 23. He does make mistakes, and that's why he needs a Nat Phillips or earlier in the season a Cahill to kind of mop up behind him because stuff happens. And that's a little bit of a worry for me in the Premier League, that he might get exposed a little bit more, particularly if you've got a forward that's really pushing on him, and which is what you get in the Premier League, especially from the big six. But he's an England under-21 international. I do think he's good enough one day to be in that discussion as well for the full England team. He's not there yet, of course, but I think he's only going to get better.
Okay, interesting. Goalkeeper Mark Travers, who me and Neil can basically never have a conversation with each other without mentioning, because he made his debut against Tottenham a few years ago, late in the season, and Neil was messaging me while I was on route to the pub saying, "Oh, we've got a kid in goal, we're in trouble." I was like, "He'll have the game of his life. It's certain, it's written." And sure enough, he basically did. I think we should have been about 4 up at half time. You ended up winning. We finished with about 9 men. He's now first choice. He's kind of seen off the challenge of Freddie Woodman towards the second half of the season, who was on loan as well. Is he Premier League ready, Travers?
I think he's earned his chance. I think that, looking at his stats, I think he made 122 saves, 0 errors, leading to a goal. That says Premier League ready to me, particularly when you consider 20 clean sheets. He won the Golden Glove. I mean, if you're ever going to make a step up from the Championship to the Premier League, that's got to be it, right? I do suspect we will improve at goalkeeper over the summer. We definitely need a new backup. I mean, we don't currently have a senior. Well, we have one, a kid, Dennis, but I don't expect I think he'll go out on loan. So if you take him out of the equation, assuming Woodman goes back, which he might not, by the way, we need a second goalie /1B. Depending on how they look at that, they may look to bring in someone that can, that's an improvement on Travers. But I do think that would be harsh. Personally, I think he's earned a chance.
Woodman's not going to want to come and be second choice, though, is he? Basically third choice at Newcastle. But after his season at Swansea last season, he's going to want to go somewhere and be number one, surely.
Yeah, I expect so. I was delighted when we signed him. I think it was unfortunate for him because I think if he'd come in at the start of the season, he would have started in goal and Travers wouldn't have got the chance. But that's not what happened. He was in goal for that awful Boreham Wood game that I try to forget. And he didn't particularly, cover himself in glory, and he hasn't played since. I do think there's part of it is just it was Travers to lose, and Travers never did anything wrong to lose it. So, but there are rumours that we are looking at perhaps either extending the loan or bringing him in permanently and sort of saying, look, you two, you're both young goalies. Go, make it your own. And he may want that challenge because at Newcastle, he's just not got a chance, especially now. I mean, they're only going to bring in better, right? He needs to move, and it's up to him. I think if he's available, I could see us going for him.
Right back, familiar names, Adam Smith, Jack Stacey. Is that likely to continue with those two, is it?
I think Adam Smith, yes. I think Jack Stacey will leave over the summer, unfortunately. I think he's dropped down the pecking order a little bit. I do think he's a fabulous championship right back. I think he gets a little bit exposed on the ball in the Premier League. I think he's on that sort of cusp level, but it's one of the both fullback positions really I think we'll look to bring in this summer. Those would be two of the spots I would target. I think Adam Smith will definitely still be around, but he will probably move to being a more of a backup. He'll probably still play something like 15, 20 games for us, but I wouldn't be rushing to put him in my team next year.
You mentioned in fantasy, aren't you? The other side would be more interesting, wouldn't it, with Jordan Zamora?
That's a lot more interesting, yes. Now, again, it will be very interesting if he gets the trust in the Premier League, but there is a very clear correlation between us winning games, or at least not losing games, and Zamora being in the team. I think of the 8 games we lost this year, Zamora wasn't in the team for 5 of them. Yeah. I think we were a lot worse off with him out of the team. Again, I hope he gets a chance, but I can, the Premier League's so cutthroat, I could see a situation where, unfortunately, he does not this year.
Can he cover inside as well at centre-back?
No, he probably could, but he's one of these sort of wingers that's dropped back as opposed to a centre-back that's moved across. But I do think one of the reasons he's done so well is the partnership he's formed with Anthony on the left wing. So those two, they live together. They've not come through our system per se. Bournemouth have changed tact from trying to develop their own youngsters to kind of doing, I guess it's similar to the Brentford model where you hoover up youngsters that are being dropped by your West Hams, your Spurs, etc., and you bring them on. So I believe Zamora was Arsenal, but I could be wrong there. He's been with us for still like 3 years or so. Anthony, similar sort of story there. I think he came from one of the London clubs and has a de facto come through the academy, but he wasn't sort of a graduate as such.
Premier League ready, Jayden Anthony? In your opinion?
I would be very surprised if he's there in the starting 11 on day one. Okay. I think he's going to be a fabulous bit part player. Again, he's earned a chance to show that he can step up. But again, it's cutthroat. I would be very surprised if we don't sign a left winger this summer.
And I guess, he's done well this year, hasn't he, Stan? Obviously, you lost Danjuma last summer. So, he's done quite well in the position, hasn't he? 14 attacking returns total. But you think probably not Premier League ready. He's only 22 as well, isn't he? So
it's not a criticism of him to say that he's not quite there yet. I think... he's had a fantastic season. To be fair, all the 3 kids we've just mentioned in a row there, Travers, Zamora, and Anthony, they've all massively surpassed my expectations for them this year. They've really stepped up, and all 3 of them have been key members of the promotion squad. I just think I could see a situation where they're displaced to bring in perhaps someone a bit more proven in that position. Just because, unfortunately, we're not going to be in a position next year where we can give youth a chance necessarily. We've got to win. We've got to win games. We've got to win those games where perhaps it's a little bit closer and you need a little bit more experience. But that said, if they are there, I would back them.
Talk to me about Lewis Cook. Where's he at now in his career? Because he's obviously had terrible injuries and picked up a really bad one. At a moment, he was really on the fringe of potentially playing for England. Where's he at with his career now?
So he's had two big injuries. So he had He's had the one in the Premier League. He had another one that he was recovering from at the start of this year. I think it's one in each knee from memory. But now he has this sort of the last 8 months, last 2/3 of the season, he really stepped up, and he's starting to show again the player that we thought we were buying from Leeds. He was controlling the ball, everything. He was our central midfield playmaker. He has got a little bit of that Leeds flair about him, should I say?
What, overzealous tackles?
Yeah, he's not scared. He won't back out of a tackle. He will, but he everything goes through him in the middle of the park. He's really showing his class again, and I expect him to continue that in the Prem.
The midfield three, to me, Lerma, who's I've told you before, he's such a dislikable player. Really, really.
But you would love him if he was in the Spurs shirt.
No, I'm not sure he's good enough, mate. But I know what you mean. He is one of them players.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of needs one. Someone you love, someone the opposition hates. Lerma's certainly. I mean, he'll get if he plays every game next year, he'll get about 14, 15 yellow cards, won't he? It's almost certain.
He has got better at that.
Has he?
But yes, a little bit.
I believe it when I see it.
Little bit.
Him, Cook and Billing, though, as a three, he looks on paper Premier League ready to me.
I completely agree. I don't expect a huge change in the middle of the park over the summer.
Need depth there more than anything, I should imagine.
Exactly that. I was saying, I've said it online a few times actually, that I could see a position where Bournemouth go into the first day of the season with almost exactly the same starting 11. But it's the other 14 players that make up a squad that worry me. We are wafer thin parts, certainly in terms of Premier League quality. So we need another centre back at least, but assuming that certain players that I expect to go out.
And you're working on Phillips already signing, so you're talking about another one on top of that, right?
I'm working on the theory that Phillips either comes back on loan or signs. So we need another centre back. We need a right back, possibly a left back.
Possibly a goalkeeper.
Possibly a goalkeeper.
You're telling me there's going to be the same team, Neil? I'm not sure it is.
Well, no, but I'm saying that I could see a situation where we have the same 11, but it's those bit part players, it's the depth that we might choose to bring in. So there's a lot of talk at the moment of a certain freeze that we're going to pick up in the Championship. So Rothwell from Blackburn, we had a lot of interest in him over the January window. We got a little bit priced out by Blackburn, but he's now available on a free, and we're expected to pursue that again. He's a sort of central midfield player that could come in, and he may not displace sort of Billing and Cook, but he will add that depth. And I think that's going to be key for this Bournemouth squad. I don't think we lost. We still got Premier League quality in this team. We just need the Premier League quality out of the team, if that makes sense.
Yep. No, it absolutely does. Talk to us a bit about Billing, because I think, do you know what, he'd have been knocking about in a few FPL teams a few years ago as a 4.4 million option at Huddersfield, I think. This is a different player now, though, isn't it?
It's a completely different Billing to the player we last saw in the Premier League. Back then, he was almost playing that Lerma role. He was playing as a central midfield, brick house player. He has moved forward, and we saw it start to happen actually last year. He started to move a little bit more forward under Woodgate and move into that almost shadow striker sort of role as an attacking midfielder. What does happen, and what I would like to point out now as people that might be looking at a few Bournemouth assets in fantasy next year, Billing does sometimes end up as the sort of focal point. He does end up beyond Solanke. Solanke can drop back sometimes and try and play Billing in. So that is quite interesting to me. He's added goals to his lineup. He's added a little bit more nous to his game. He's a little bit more of an intelligent player than he was last time. I mean, he got 10 goals this year as well.
And 10 assists.
And 10 assists. And probably the biggest assist he'll ever make as well was one of those.
Yes. From a completely unrehearsed free kick, I'd like to add. But if he comes in It's interesting to think how FPL will price him, because I can't think FPL will put him at as high as sort of 6 million or so. Probably feels over the top. 5.5 and less, he'd be very. I think 5 million, he'd go in for me. I could probably say
agree.
that now. I think 5.5 would probably be borderline. I think 6 would probably be a no. But he's a player I'm really interested to look at for the start of next season, actually. Subject to your fixture list and other bits as well.
Yeah, of course. And you know, where we sit today, he is one of the 3 players I'm looking at. This is, again, subject to transfers, etc., that dependent on that price, if he's in that sort of 5 million, you know, maybe 5.5, depending on how others sit, I think he'd be very interesting. I don't expect him to get 10 goals in the Premier League, but I could see him getting, you know, 6 or 7, and then maybe that again in, you know, some, you know, a chunky few assists, and enabling you to bring in those sort of, you know, premium players as well. And he will definitely be in that starting 11 again, unless we sign someone mad.
Yeah, agreed. I think he's one really, really to watch out for. I know who one of the other players is that you'd really have your eye on. Who's the third?
Travers.
Okay, interesting.
Again, presuming we don't go mad with the goalkeepers, I just think he's going to be at that bottom end of that price point for goalkeepers.
It'll be 4.5, yeah.
It'll be 4.5, and you know, last year, and appreciate that there are more games in the Championship, but he would have been pushing 200 points if you know, in FPL points. I think he could very easily be in that sort of 120 sort of mark, where, you know, and for a value goalkeeper, as a sort of second goalkeeper, if you'd like to have sort of an Edison or an Allison as a sort of a fire and forget goalie, he would be a really good choice, I think. And I think that's where Bournemouth will shine from an FPL point of view this year, is we're going to be the value team. Like we were when we first came into the Premier League. I can see us being really undervalued by the valuers.
I don't know how many of us started with Callum Wilson back then, but I think a few of us will be starting with Dominic Solanke, won't we?
I agree. I think he's a really good choice. I mean, again, like when he left the Premier League, he was 4.7, I think, when we went down. And okay, there will be a lot of people, and I know he was linked to Newcastle yesterday, and a lot of the Newcastle fans were like, you know, what the heck is this? But, you know, any other season, take Mitrovic out of the equation.
We'd be going mad over him, but he's not getting noticed.
He's not getting. He had 36 attacking returns last year.
Well, he's basically had a season numbers-wise very similar to Tony's last year, right?
Exactly. So I think any other year, we're looking at him as the attacking option from the Championship. And I don't expect him to be particularly highly priced either. You know, I suspect he'll come in at a similar level to what Tony did, perhaps a little bit less, just because he did have slightly worse numbers. And that's an interesting option if you don't want Mitrovic. Or if Fulham start with, you know, really horrible fixtures, you know, and we start with a relatively nice one, I think he would be a good option there. I certainly don't see us signing a striker that would to replace him, unless he goes for some reason, because someone makes us a ridiculous bid.
Can I ask you, what price do you think Mitrovic will be?
I think it'd be 7.
So what you think, Solanke 6.5?
I think Solanke would be cheaper for sure.
It can't be the same as Mitrovic. You can't be.
No, you can't be. So yeah, I think Solanke 6.5. If we get really lucky, 6, just because it's, you know, he was only 4.7 last year, and I don't know how much.
I don't think they take any notice of that, because if they did that, then Mitrovic will be 6 as well, and on his numbers this year, I don't think he will be.
No, but it's night and day, isn't it? But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, if it's 6.5 and then 7 for Mitrovic, I think you've got a decision to make there.
We spoke about him a lot, didn't we, in the past, about kind of real crossroads. I think you and I 2 years ago, when you went down, were like that he can't be in the Championship for more than a year. He's either going to go one way or the other. He's either going to come up with you, or he's going to move to someone else. And it's taken a year longer. But you're happy with him to start as your main striker next year, I would think, yeah? Yeah,
he's matured into that player that we all hoped he would be. He's got a real sort of, we're starting to see his sort of real like clinicism, his real finishing quality, his football brain, all of these things that were talked about by the sort of Chelsea academy staff when he left there.
I think anybody saw him play for the England kids that won the World Cup as well, like knew there was going to be a super talent now.
And he's starting to show it. I would be very surprised if he doesn't make the step up. I think he's He's got all of the attributes that you look for in a good Premier League striker. He's strong. He can hold the ball up well. He will create chances from nothing. He's added heading into his game properly as well. We've seen him not so much score so many of them, but he's been, he's 4 saves, and he will finish from chances that you think, how the hell has he done that? There was one at Birmingham away this year where I still don't know how he did it.
It's interesting. This year, forwards in FPL has obviously been like a bit of a graveyard position. Everyone's like, I'm going 4-5-1 next year. Listen, you're all starting with Solanke, Mitrovic and Haaland, so stop thinking about it. Just when the game opens, off you go. I think the ownership of them 3 will be, it's almost like the template front 3 already, isn't it? Starting next season. Yeah,
I agree. And then that opens up your midfield for all of these lovely, massive behemoths that we all want, right? Your De Bruyne's, your Salahs, etc.
Good morning, Kevin De Bruyne, by the way. No, I don't own him.
I don't either. But my word, what a player, right?
Oh, that's for another podcast, mate. A few things I want to finish up on with you. Ryan Christie, good enough or not?
Again, I think he'll be given the chance. He came here with the ambition to step up to the Premier League. He has that sort of Celtic experience, so he has big game experience. What he needs to add is finishing. His assists are brilliant. And his assists, if you like, though that sort of playmaking. Put it this way: right wing would not be top of my list. I think I expect him to start come the first game of the season.
Or is there a chance for a romantic story with David Brooks, which is obviously one of the kind of stories of the season? Yeah. Obviously picked up cancer, and he'd announced, I think it was about 5 hours before you beat Forest, that he was obviously free of cancer, which is amazing news. Talk to us about him a little bit if you can.
Yeah, I mean, it was the highlight of the day, really. It sort of does put everything into focus. Absolutely, every fan has probably heard about this, about it. Bournemouth fans on the 7th minute of every single game this year chanted for him. He was there on the Forest game. Obviously, fabulous news that he's beaten it. From a football point of view, I suspect we won't see him in August. He's been through the ringer, right? Bless him. He's got to come back. He's got to build up his fitness. I would be very surprised to see him at the start. I do expect he will appear this year. But, I mean, with what he's been through, is he going to be the same player? I hope so. I really do. But you've got to ask that question. And I hope the answer is yes.
I saw Christian Eriksen in front of my eyes a couple of weeks ago, mate. So
I agree.
Don't rule it out, mate.
Oh, I'm not, and I think he will be back, and I think he will get to that level. Of sportsmen in all sports, they're weird creatures, right? I mean, they're not like you and I. The stuff that they bounce back from.
Particularly the YouTube viewers can see that, Neil.
I don't know what you mean. I'm a live figure. But yeah, I mean, you get my point. They're just a different species, right? They're the stuff they bounce back from. I mean, every single player out on any given game day has an injury. It's just how much are they playing through? Probably injuries that you and I would just be like, would duck out a 5-a-side for, right?
Certainly great to hear that he's obviously free now anyway. And I'm sure we will see him at some point in the Premier League over the course of next season. We look forward to it. And then you want to talk about his fan pass as well. Talk to me a little bit about this, mate.
Yeah, so anyone that follows me, on Twitter and things, will have perhaps seen the video that we've been that's been really going around the sort of Bournemouth Twitter sphere. Again, I mean, in terms of sort of adversity going into a year for a football club, I think Bournemouth pretty much had everything other than the financial side of it. With David Brooks, we did unfortunately lose one of pretty much the main fan. The central. Every club has one, right? That everyone recognises. Everyone goes and says hello. Unfortunately, Bournemouth, we lost ours this year. You can even hear him in FIFA. He was, a really central figure. And I think one of the most emotional moments for me of that day, that Forest game, was post the game. We chanted for him, the Bournemouth fans. He used to lead sort of our Red Army chant. I'm sure fans will have heard it when it heard us on away days and things. And the Bournemouth fans called for his song, and the club does have a recording of it. They've been playing it every start of every half to get the crowd going, and the club responded to it. So obviously we did his, Nonny give us a song, and the club did respond with his Red Army chant, which I don't think there was a dry eye in the house, and I think it gets lost a lot that Bournemouth, we talk about, you mentioned it yourself, parachute payments and all of this, but where we've come from. I mean, we're still a family club. I'm sure of it. We've still got the smallest ground to race the Premier League. We've got that real close knit community. There are not hundreds of thousands of Bournemouth fans, right? There's no two ways about it. So when you lose someone like that, and every single player knew him, and would have been fighting for him, and all of that, and it was really emotional, and it showed me that the club hasn't strayed too far from us putting 50p in a bucket. Its roots, exactly that. Yeah, yes. That was really good to see.
Your story for Bournemouth fans would always very much, I think, be remembered about the points deduction and nearly going down into non-league football as much as almost now.
And I think that really has been lost a little bit with the whole, they've got a Russian owner and all of this. And okay, yes, we do. And I'm not going to pretend like we didn't hit the football jackpot in that regard. But I do think there's a lot to be said for us being successful as a club. That, if you're a Cambridge or a Rotherham or a Lincoln or, someone like that, there's absolutely no reason why you can't dream about the Premier League. And we're a living proof of that. We only get the parachute payments because we got there. It's not like we won a lottery and, a load of money appeared from nowhere. We got that money due to success, and we could debate parachute payments all day long, I'm sure. But we got there because we got that because we got there. And I'm not, we've got no right to go back, but we've done it. And I do think we that perhaps does get lost.
I don't think you should lose sight of where you're from, mate. Don't worry about the outside noises, mate. Yes, we could debate parachute payments all day long and whether they're right or wrong. But then you got cases like Luton Town this year that exactly what you said near the start show what can be achieved. They were National League, 5-6 years ago or something? And I think exactly. their squad value, I think, is about 1.5 million or something. For comparison, yours is still over about 100 million. I guess that kind of proves the point of difference and the levels of view change to the football club. That said, though, Neil, can you make that stadium a bit bigger? Because I can't get a ticket. No,
I can't get a ticket either.
Mate? I know. Can you do something with it?
I wish they would. I do think, there's been a lot of talk about it. I don't expect it to be this year. I don't expect them to make any changes this year. The fans, we want the training ground. So there was a training ground that was going to be built. Then everything happened, at once. The finances obviously looked much worse then. But I think there's a hope that perhaps it might be on the agenda. I think that would be a huge part of the football club. At the moment, our training ground is literally porta cabins, stacked on top of each other. I'm sure they look lovely from the inside. But they are porta cabins.
Belong together, mate.
Well, we can't all have shiny stadiums, but at the same time, I'm a big believer that our stadium is one of our biggest strengths as a club. There just isn't another. There isn't another club at that level where you are literally on the pitch, basically, right, or practically on the pitch.
Until Luton come up with you.
I'll bring them on. I really want them to. I think it would be the biggest sort of, two fingers up at the EFL if they both of us are in the Premier League. We had point deductions at the same time, and Rotherham got promoted this year as well. So they were the three that between us, I think we had something like 40 points deducted in the same year. But of course, we're the ones running football, not the breakaway teams. But again, that's another podcast, right?
Who do you think will win the playoffs? I think I know what you're going to say.
Do you?
I think you're going to say Forest.
I think it could be. I think it's between Forest and Blades. I think whoever wins that tie will win it. But I think when you have all that momentum in the build-up and it gets just stopped dead, and you have all of that, we're coming for Bournemouth, we're going to get that second spot, and then all of a sudden it just dies. And I don't think they played particularly well last game of the season either. I think they should do it. They had all that momentum, but that's a big mental hurdle to go across, right? You've lost that goal. And okay, as much as Cooper was like, we're going for the playoffs, we want to get in the playoffs, you're not telling me they didn't have one eye on that second spot. Of course they did. And
let's be honest, if they'd have beat you last Tuesday, you'd have shit yourself, mate. Oh
yeah, 100%. I wouldn't have feared anyone necessarily in the playoffs. I think we've got a good record against all of them, apart from Luton, who beat us in the last second at Kenilworth Road. But I do think, like Huddersfield, they're no mugs at all. They
I was going to say, it feels like everyone's overlooking them, and they've had a brilliant season, and they're playing some good stuff as well.
I agree. Honestly, I think you could make an argument for any one of those four, and it's been a while since you've been able to. There hasn't been with the greatest respect to Barnsley last year, their achievement was getting to the playoffs, right? And okay, you've got to be in it to win it, but did anyone really expect them to win the playoffs? No. But I could see Luton doing it. I could see Huddersfield doing it, certainly Blades and Forest. So I think that tie is going to be very tasty. Forest versus Blades is going to be huge. And it's almost a shame that those two clubs are facing off in the semis as opposed to the final, but that's the way it goes, right?
Go on then. One team. Who's doing it?
I'm going to go Huddersfield. I think they're the dark horse.
You said for Forest or Sheffield United at the start. I think you just named them all, mate.
I know. I've massively hedged my bets there. I'm going to say Luton. No, I think it's going to be Huddersfield. I've changed my mind. I've talked myself into Huddersfield.
All right. And if Bournemouth don't sign any players this summer, is this squad good enough to stay up?
No, not the squad. I think the 11 could be. The squad isn't.
Yeah, I think that's right, Neil. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, mate. Where can everyone follow you on the Bird app?
So I'm at AFCB NG.
Super. And we will hear from you again during the summer. We will no doubt do correspondent week. Again, we look forward to having you back as our Premier League correspondent for Bournemouth for next season. Congratulations again, mate. Suj will be back tomorrow as me and Suj review all the game week 36 games, which includes the small matter of tonight's North London derby. If you don't know the result, you can just come here and look at my face tomorrow on YouTube and you'll know if we've won or not. Other than that, thanks again to Neil. Cue music, please, man child.